When I try to kick him, I just put halfway, he fit in my face. And they stop there, I pose. They ask me, how is it?
At 72 years old, Sammo Hung sits with the weight of decades behind him. Decades filled with impossible kicks, gravity-defying stunts, and a legacy that helped define martial arts cinema as we know it. Yet for all his accomplishments, one relationship has remained largely unspoken, shrouded in respect, nostalgia, and perhaps a touch of pain that only time can soften. Now, after years of careful silence, Hung has decided to open up about his connection with Bruce Lee, the man who changed everything. Their relationship was complex, equal parts friendship and rivalry, mentorship and mutual challenge. It was forged in the heat of Hong Kong film sets, where egos clashed and bodies flew through the air with choreographed precision. What Hung reveals about their time together, particularly a heart-stopping moment on the set of Fist of Fury, illuminates not just the legend of Bruce Lee, but the profound impact one martial artist can have on another's entire life trajectory. This is the story of two titans whose paths crossed at the perfect moment, creating sparks that would ignite an entire genre and reshape how the world viewed martial arts forever. Born Hung Kam-bo on January 7, 1952 in Hong Kong, Sammo Hung entered a world already steeped in the traditions of Chinese cinema and performance. His family had deep roots in the entertainment industry. His grandparents were film industry professionals who understood the grueling demands and spectacular rewards of show business. This early exposure to the mechanics of filmmaking would prove invaluable, giving young Sammo an insider's perspective on an industry that chewed up and spit out countless hopefuls. At the tender age of 9, Hung's life took a decisive turn when he enrolled in the China Drama Academy, a Peking opera school run by the legendary master Yu Jim Yuan. This wasn't a school in any conventional sense. It was a brutal, exhausting institution where children trained for up to 18 hours a day, mastering acrobatics, martial arts, acting, singing, and stagecraft. The discipline was severe, sometimes crossing into cruelty by modern standards, but it produced performers of extraordinary skill and resilience. At the academy, Hung became one of the 7 Little Fortunes, an elite performance troupe that included several future martial arts cinema legends. Among his fellow students was a skinny, energetic boy named Chan Kong Sang, who would later become known to the world as Jackie Chan. The bonds formed during those grueling years of training created friendships and professional relationships that would define Hong Kong action cinema for generations. These young performers learned not just techniques, but an approach to entertainment that blended martial arts prowess with theatrical flair, comedy with danger, and discipline with creative innovation. Hung's physical presence set him apart from many of his contemporaries. Unlike the lean, chiseled physiques that typically dominated martial arts films, Hung was stocky and round-faced, his body type more suited to comedy than conventional heroics. Yet this apparent disadvantage became his greatest asset. He developed a fighting style that emphasized power, speed, and technique over aesthetics, proving that martial arts mastery came in many forms. His ability to move with shocking agility despite his build became his signature, defying audience expectations and creating a unique screen presence. His early film career began modestly in the 1960s, with small roles and stunt work that allowed him to learn the technical aspects of filmmaking while honing his performance skills. He worked alongside Jackie Chan in several early productions, their childhood friendship translating into professional collaboration. These formative years taught Hung the importance of innovation in martial arts choreography. Simply replicating traditional forms wouldn't capture audiences in an increasingly competitive entertainment landscape. He began experimenting with ways to make fight scenes more dynamic, more emotionally engaging, and more visually spectacular than anything audiences had seen before. The late 1970s and early 1980s represented a golden age for Hong Kong martial arts cinema, and Sammo Hung was at its forefront. His breakthrough came with Iron-Fisted Monk, 1977, his directorial debut that showcased his vision for what martial arts storytelling could be. The film wasn't just about spectacular fight sequences. though it had plenty of those, but about characters, emotion, and narrative depth. Hung understood that audiences needed to care about who was fighting and why, not just marvel at the technical execution of kicks and punches. Encounters of the Spooky Kind, 1980, demonstrated Hung's genius for blending genres. The film combined martial arts action with horror and comedy, creating something entirely fresh in Hong Kong cinema. His choreography in this film and others revealed an artist at the height of his creative powers, someone who understood how to build tension, release it with explosive action, and then provide comic relief that made audiences laugh without undermining the drama. This delicate balance became Hung's trademark, influencing countless filmmakers who followed. The Magnificent Butcher, 1979, and The Prodigal Son, 1981, further cemented Hung's status as both a performer and director of exceptional talent. These films featured some of the most intricate and beautifully executed fight choreography ever captured on film. Hung's approach emphasized realism within stylization. His fights looked spectacular, but maintained an internal logic and physicality that grounded them in believable human capability, even when pushing the boundaries of what seemed possible. His collaborations with Jackie Chan and Yuen Biao created some of Hong Kong cinema's most beloved films. Project A, 1983, and Wheels on Meals, 1984, showcased three martial arts masters at their peak, each bringing unique strengths to elaborate set pieces that required split-second timing, fearless stunt work, and complete trust among the performers. The chemistry between Hung, Chan, and Yuen was palpable, their childhood bonds translating into an intuitive understanding of each other's movements and capabilities. What set Hung apart from many of his contemporaries was his understanding that martial arts cinema needed to evolve. He pioneered techniques in fight choreography that made action more cinematic, using camera angles, editing, and staging to enhance rather than merely document the physical performances. His innovations influenced not just Hong Kong filmmakers, but eventually Hollywood, as Western directors began studying his work to understand how to shoot action sequences that felt visceral and immediate while remaining comprehensible to audiences. The year was 1972, and Sammo Hung was working as a stuntman and fight choreographer on Fist of Fury, also known as The Chinese Connection, Bruce Lee's second major film after The Big Boss. Lee was already becoming a phenomenon in Hong Kong. His magnetic screen presence and revolutionary approach to on-screen martial arts generating tremendous excitement. For Hung, this was an opportunity to work with someone whose reputation was growing by the day, someone who was changing perceptions about what martial arts could look like on film. Their first meeting carried the electricity of two masters sizing each other up. Lee, with his lean, sculpted physique and lightning-fast movements, represented one ideal of martial arts excellence. Hung, stockier and more grounded in traditional forms, represented another. The contrast was obvious, but so was the mutual respect between two men who recognized genuine skill when they saw it. The moment that would define their relationship and profoundly impact Hung's understanding of martial arts came during a break in filming. Whether from genuine curiosity, friendly challenge, or youthful bravado, Hung questioned Bruce Lee's legendary speed. Lee's reputation for impossibly fast strikes had already become part of his mystique, but Hung, confident in his own considerable abilities, apparently wanted to see for himself if the stories were true. What happened next entered martial arts legend. Lee invited Hung to test his speed, and in a move almost too fast for Hung to register, Lee's foot stopped just millimeters from Hung's face. The kick hadn't been a demonstration done at half speed for safety. It was full power, full speed, controlled with such precision that Lee could stop it at the exact moment before impact. For Hung, it was a revelation that went beyond simple respect for a colleague's skill. It was a glimpse into a level of mastery that redefined his understanding of what human capability could achieve. Years later, Hung would reflect on this moment as transformative. It wasn't just about Bruce Lee's speed, though. That was remarkable enough. It was about the control, the confidence, and the precision that speed represented. Lee had trained his body and mind to operate at a level that seemed to transcend normal human limitations. For Hung, who had dedicated his life to martial arts from childhood, seeing someone push boundaries he hadn't even imagined possible was both humbling and inspiring. This encounter shaped Hung's approach to martial arts choreography for the rest of his career. He began emphasizing not just the visual spectacle of fights, but the technical mastery and emotional intensity that made them meaningful. Lee's influence taught him that audiences could sense authenticity, that they responded to genuine skill and dedication in ways that transcended language and culture. The lesson stayed with Hung through decades of filmmaking, informing his work long after Lee's death had robbed the world of one of its greatest martial artists. In 1973, Sammo Hung's professional relationship with Bruce Lee deepened when he was cast in Enter the Dragon, the film that would introduce Lee to Western audiences and fundamentally change how martial arts were portrayed in cinema worldwide. Hung played Lee's sparring partner in the film's opening sequence, a role that, while brief, placed him at the center of one of martial arts cinema's most iconic moments. The opening fight scene of Enter the Dragon showcased Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do philosophy in action, the emphasis on speed, directness, and efficiency that had become Lee's trademark. For Hung, working closely with Lee on this sequence provided an intimate education in Lee's approach to movement and combat. Every detail mattered to Lee: the angle of a strike, the timing of a block, the subtle body positioning that made techniques more effective. His perfectionism was legendary and sometimes exhausting, but it produced results that elevated everyone around him. During the filming, Hung observed Lee's work ethic with a mixture of admiration and awe. Lee approached every take with total commitment, never settling for good enough when excellence was possible. He would drill sequences repeatedly, adjusting small details until the choreography flowed with the precision of a musical composition. This dedication went beyond professional pride. It reflected Lee's philosophy that martial arts were an expression of personal character, that how you trained and performed revealed who you were as a person. The mutual respect between Hung and Lee grew during this collaboration. Lee recognized Hung as a fellow master who understood martial arts at a deep level, someone who could execute complex choreography while bringing authentic martial skill to the performance. Hung, for his part, appreciated Lee's willingness to push boundaries and challenge conventions about how martial arts should appear on screen. Their conversations between takes ranged from technical discussions about specific techniques to broader philosophical questions about the nature of martial arts and their representation in cinema. Yet beneath the friendship and mutual admiration ran an undercurrent of competition. Both men were supremely confident in their abilities, both driven to be the best. This competitive edge wasn't hostile. It was the kind of rivalry that pushes excellence to even greater heights. They challenged each other, pushed each other, and ultimately made each other better through their interactions. For Hung, who would spend the rest of his career working to advance martial arts cinema, the experience of matching skills with Bruce Lee provided both inspiration and a standard of excellence to aspire toward. The filming of Enter the Dragon represented a peak moment in both men's careers, though neither could have known how tragically brief Lee's time remained. The film would become a worldwide phenomenon, breaking box office records and introducing Western audiences to a Chinese martial arts master whose charisma and skill transcended cultural boundaries. For Hung, being part of this historic film connected him permanently to Lee's legacy, a connection he would carry with pride and some pain for the rest of his life. On July 20th, 1973, the martial arts world was shattered by news that seemed impossible to believe. Bruce Lee, just 32 years old and at the absolute peak of his powers, was dead. The circumstances surrounding his death, cerebral edema following a reaction to medication, only deepened the shock and disbelief. How could someone so young, so vital, so seemingly invincible be suddenly gone? For Sammo Hung, the loss was profound and multifaceted. He had lost a friend, a colleague, and a source of inspiration whose influence had fundamentally shaped his understanding of martial arts and filmmaking. The grief that swept through Hong Kong's film community was intense, but for those like Hung who had worked closely with Lee, who had experienced his energy and dedication firsthand, the pain cut particularly deep. Hung struggled to process the reality that he would never again share a set with Lee, never engage in those technical conversations about choreography and technique, never witness another demonstration of the lightning-fast precision that had so impressed him on the set of Fist of Fury. The projects they might have collaborated on, the innovations they might have pioneered together, the evolution of martial arts cinema they might have driven, all of it vanished in an instant, replaced by what-ifs and might-have-beens that would haunt Hung for decades. The martial arts community collectively mourned not just the man, but the unfulfilled potential. Lee had been on the verge of even greater international success, poised to break down barriers and bring martial arts and Chinese cinema to global prominence in ways that had never been achieved before. His death created a void that no single person could fill, leaving his contemporaries to carry forward his vision as best they could, while knowing their efforts would always be incomplete without him. For Hung specifically, Lee's death reinforced the fragility of life and the importance of maximizing one's time and talents. He had witnessed greatness up close, had been challenged and inspired by it, and now that greatness was gone forever. The lesson wasn't lost on him. Life offered no guarantees, no promises of tomorrow. The only response was to honor Lee's memory through excellence in his own work, to carry forward the standards of dedication and innovation that Lee had embodied. In the years immediately following Lee's death, Hong Kong cinema experienced a flood of Bruce Lee imitators and exploitation films trying to capitalize on his fame. Hung found this phenomenon distasteful, a crass commercialization of a genuine artist's legacy. He resolved that his own approach would be different. Rather than imitate Lee, he would honor him by pushing martial arts cinema forward in new directions, by maintaining the commitment to excellence that Lee had exemplified while finding his own distinctive voice and style. The late 1970s and 1980s saw Sammo Hung emerge as one of the most important figures in martial arts cinema, carrying forward Bruce Lee's revolutionary spirit while carving out his own unique identity. Films like The Magnificent Butcher, The Prodigal Son, and Project A demonstrated that Hung had absorbed Lee's lessons about authenticity and innovation while developing his own approach that emphasized humor, character, and elaborate choreography. Hung's distinctive contribution to martial arts cinema was his seamless blending of comedy with action. Where Lee's films had been intense and dramatic, Hung recognized that humor could enhance rather than diminish martial arts sequences. His fight scenes often incorporated comic elements, characters fighting while drunk, battles involving unusual objects or locations, confrontations that built tension through humor before exploding into serious action. This approach made his films accessible to broader audiences while maintaining the technical excellence and authentic martial arts skill that purists demanded. His choreography evolved in ways that reflected Lee's influence while pushing in new directions. Hung emphasized fluidity and continuous motion in his fight sequences, creating battles that felt like elaborate dances where every movement flowed organically from what came before. He experimented with camera placement and editing techniques that made action more dynamic and immersive. His innovations influenced not just Hong Kong filmmakers, but eventually Hollywood, as Western directors began studying his techniques to improve their own action sequences. The collaboration between Hung, Jackie Chan, and Yuan Biao during this period produced some of martial arts cinema's most memorable moments. These three China Drama Academy graduates, now at the peak of their abilities, created set pieces of stunning complexity and creativity. Their films featured action sequences that seemed to defy physics, characters swinging from poles, fighting on moving vehicles, incorporating props and environments in ways that had never been attempted before. The mutual trust and understanding among these performers, forged during their brutal childhood training, allowed them to attempt stunts that would have been impossible with less experienced or cohesive teams. Through all of this work, Bruce Lee's shadow remained. Hung often spoke about Lee in interviews, always with respect and evident emotion. He made clear that Lee had raised the bar for everyone in the industry, that his brief career had permanently changed expectations about what martial arts cinema could achieve. Hung saw himself not as Lee's successor, but as someone working in parallel, advancing the art form in different ways, while honoring the standards of excellence Lee had established. Despite his artistic triumphs, the late 1980s and early 1990s brought significant challenges for Sammo Hung. As Jackie Chan's international fame exploded, particularly after the success of films like Rumble in the Bronx and his Hollywood breakthrough with Rush Hour, Hung found himself somewhat overshadowed. The industry was changing, with younger stars emerging and audience taste shifting toward different styles of action cinema. His production company, Boho Films, faced financial difficulties that strained Hung's resources and creative independence. The Hong Kong film industry itself was experiencing turmoil, with increased competition from Hollywood productions and changing economic realities following the territory's handover to China in 1997. For someone who had been at the forefront of the industry for 2 decades, these shifts were disorienting and often disheartening. Personal challenges compounded professional difficulties. Hung's first marriage collapsed under the pressures of his demanding career and the time spent away from family. His relationships with his children suffered as he dedicated himself to filmmaking, a common pattern in an industry that demanded total commitment. Health issues also began emerging, the inevitable consequence of decades performing dangerous stunts and maintaining a punishing work schedule. Yet Hung demonstrated the resilience that had been forged during his childhood training at the China Drama Academy. Rather than fade away or retire, he adapted to changing circumstances. His role in the American television series Martial Law, 1998 to 2000, introduced him to Western audiences and provided financial stability during an uncertain period. While the show didn't achieve the artistic heights of his Hong Kong work, it demonstrated Hung's ability to translate his skills and charisma across cultural boundaries. The late 1990s and 2000s saw a creative resurgence as Hung returned to filmmaking with renewed energy. Movies like SPL Chapeau Lang, 2005, where he played a villain opposite Donnie Yen, showcased his ability to reinvent himself and remain relevant in a new era of martial arts cinema. His performance earned critical acclaim and reminded audiences of his formidable screen presence and acting ability, dimensions of his talent that had sometimes been overshadowed by his choreography and action work. At 72, Sammo Hung speaks about Bruce Lee with the perspective that only decades and lived experience can provide. The competitive edge that once characterized their relationship has softened into pure appreciation and acknowledgement of Lee's profound influence. Hung recognizes now, perhaps more clearly than he could in the immediate aftermath of Lee's death, just how transformative their encounters were for his own development as a martial artist and filmmaker. Hung's reflections reveal a man who has made peace with complex emotions, the pride of having known and worked with Lee, the lingering sadness at what might have been had Lee lived, and the satisfaction of having honored Lee's legacy through his own distinguished career. He speaks of Lee not as a competitor or even simply as a friend, but as a transformative figure whose brief time in the world fundamentally altered its trajectory. The lessons Hung learned from Lee extend far beyond specific martial arts techniques or choreographic innovations. Lee taught him about dedication, about the pursuit of excellence without compromise, about the importance of authenticity in both art and life. These principles guided Hung through 5 decades in an industry notorious for its temptations and corrupting influences. They helped him maintain artistic integrity even during periods of financial pressure and commercial compromise. Hung also reflects on how Lee's philosophy of martial arts as personal expression influenced his own approach to filmmaking. Lee had insisted that martial arts weren't about rigid adherence to tradition, but about discovering one's authentic self through practice and discipline. Hung applied this philosophy to his directorial work, constantly innovating and experimenting rather than simply replicating formulas that had worked in the past. His willingness to blend genres, to challenge conventions about what martial arts cinema could be, reflected Lee's spirit even as it created something distinctively his own. The story of Sammo Hung and Bruce Lee is ultimately about how greatness recognizes and elevates other greatness. Their relationship, though cut tragically short, demonstrates the power of mutual respect and friendly competition to push artists beyond what they thought possible. Lee challenged Hung to reconsider his assumptions about martial arts and filmmaking. Hung, in turn, helped carry forward Lee's revolutionary vision while expanding it in new directions Lee himself might never have explored. Today, Hung's influence on martial arts cinema is impossible to overstate. His choreographic innovations, his blending of action with comedy and emotion, his mentorship of younger performers and filmmakers, all of it traces back in part to those formative encounters with Bruce Lee in the early 1970s. The foot that stopped millimeters from his face on the set of Fist of Fury didn't just demonstrate Lee's remarkable control. It opened Hung's eyes to possibilities he had never imagined. As martial arts cinema continues evolving in the 21st century, both Lee's and Hung's influences remain evident. Modern action choreographers study their work, directors cite them as inspirations, and new generations of performers attempt to match the standards they established. The techniques and approaches they pioneered have been absorbed into the fundamental vocabulary of action cinema worldwide. Hung's decision to finally break his silence about Bruce Lee at 72 offers younger generations a precious gift. First-hand testimony about a legend from someone who knew him as a man, not just a myth. These stories humanize Lee while simultaneously reinforcing his extraordinary nature. They remind us that legends are built not just on natural talent, but on dedication, discipline, and an unwavering commitment to excellence that pushes beyond normal human limitations. The relationship between Sammo Hung and Bruce Lee represents a brief but brilliant intersection of two remarkable talents. Though Lee's life was cut short at 32 and their collaborations were limited, the impact of their connection reverberates through decades of cinema and continues inspiring new generations of martial artists and filmmakers. Hung's willingness to finally share his memories ensures that Lee's influence and the profound effect it had on those fortunate enough to experience it directly will endure for generations to come, a testament to the lasting power of authentic greatness and the bonds it creates between those who pursue it without compromise.